Well, welcome to Beyond Belief. I'm George Norrie, and another special guest for you, Jack Cary, is with us. Jack is a cryptozoologist. He is in charge, of course, of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency, which is an organization that looks for these very strange creatures. Jack, welcome to Beyond Belief.
Thank you, George.
How did you get involved in this? I mean, it's not that you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a cryptozoologist.
No, not specifically cryptozoology, but you become enamored by some of these paranormal mysteries,
Yes.
and that leads you into investigating some of them. And I was investigating a number of different paranormal phenomenon when I came into contact with my late partner, J.C. Johnson, who was the most renowned cryptozoologist in the world at that time. And he took me under his wing, became my mentor.
Great wing to be under.
Absolutely. He was my mentor, and I was a student in all things having to do with cryptozoology, and he wanted my expertise on things that were unrelated to cryptozoology. So together we were able to undertake a number of investigations that kind of straddled the line at times, and you know, we grew to love each other like brothers and family. So it was a great experience.
Well, Jack, we're going to begin this program on a somewhat somber note because JC is no longer with us, passing away at the age of 58 of really a tragedy of pneumonia that got to him. That's got to be pretty difficult for you.
It was a grave shock to not only me, but to the rest of the members of Crypto Four Corners, which is the foundation, the group that he founded that studies animals that really shouldn't exist but do. And it was a shock to his family. It was a grave shock to the hundreds of thousands of people that followed JC's work all around the world and visited the Crypto Four Corners YouTube channel and made it such a hit that it was. And we're still trying to get over the loss of it.
Yeah. What was it that made JC so special in the field of cryptozoology?
You know, JC not only wasn't interested in money or fame, he was simply interested in discovering and presenting the truth to the public, and that came across in everything
That's a
that he
rarity,
did.
too.
It is. He was the kind of man that would give you the shirt right off of his back, and I saw him do it with more than one stranger. And there was just this sort of magic about JC where he would attract this phenomenon. There were so many times where we are out in the field together and off the beaten path in such a way that, it'd take you a week to walk out of some of these areas. And there was some sort of magnetism about him. He attracted these creatures to him, and it was a gift. Added to that we worked with Navajo trackers for so long in northern New Mexico that we usually had them with us, and they were always teaching us how to become better trackers of some of these animals.
JC was fascinated by the Dogman case.
Yes.
As you can see behind us, kind of the swampy area, Jack found this green belt that goes all the way to the mountains and pretty much connects with the neighborhood. Would you say a mile and a half?
Yeah, approximately a mile and a half to our east.
All green belt going into this Denver suburb. So this is pretty fascinating. I'm more along the lines of thinking we might have something in the area of a dogman outside of my feelings that it was a one-time incident with a werewolf, a weird creature, skinwalker, what have you.
Well, there he was. That's the man.
The man and the legend, and he was the best at what he did, which is collecting the information that was factual about these cases and then presenting it in a way that the public was okay with.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're about, is trying to get the public to recognize and acknowledge the reality of some of these different phenomenon, including these creatures that JC would often call the remnants of the Nephilim. He held the belief, he held the belief that these were talked about in the Bible when all of creation became corrupt through the genetic manipulation of life forms here on the planet from the fallen angels. and that some of these creatures were still out there roaming around, like Dogman.
You might be right. Tell us about Dogmen. He also mentioned Skinwalkers, but what are Dogmen?
Yeah, you know, JC had the belief that and he had a really good reason to do so, because Skinwalkers and were creatures are a norm on the Navajo Indian reservations where we worked a lot, and that he had even family connections to. And he came across a number of cases where someone had seen a Skinwalker, werewolf, if you will, and followed human footprints with his native trackers until human footprints until those footprints literally turned into what appeared to be canine.
They just shift right.
They just shift from one step to the next.
And you don't miss a beat in the steps.
That's right. And these are out in areas where if you were going to try to perpetrate a hoax, the likelihood of somebody ever really coming across them for you to somehow outsmart them is just impossible. And so he had the belief that were creatures existed along with what we believe are a species of upright, walking and running canine creatures, and that these Dogmen were what they were full-time. 24 hours a day.
Were these creatures intelligent to the point where they acted more human than animal?
Very, very much so, and very reminiscent of Sasquatch. And that's what's fascinating about them, is that you have a pattern coexisting in Sasquatch and Dogman. You have existing Native American oral history going back hundreds and hundreds of years describing the creature. You have a non-stop body of credible witnesses coming forward telling you what they saw. You have physical evidence being left in the form of footprints and DNA. Dr. 𝗪𝗪𝗕𝗦𝗧 actually was able to collect Dogman DNA from her own personal encounter, which she's spoken of now publicly. And you have what appears to be a pattern of people seeing them in very specific places, and that pattern with Dogman is water, cornfields, and Native American burial mounds. Anytime you look up a very credible Dogman sighting, those three things were present, and those three things were present in the liquid lichen case, which you guys just showed a clip of.
Has anybody reported of anything serious in terms of Dogmen attacking them or anything like that?
There have been a number of people, for instance, a jogger in Canada that was wounded by one of these creatures. They've been chased numerous times. There have been many witnesses who have fired firearms at them.
Have they hit them?
Claimed to have hit them, and also claimed it seemed to have no effect on the creature. I, in my own research, investigating the Dogmen sightings, came across the fact that in south and central Oklahoma, for instance, dating around the early 1900s, in these little old overgrown and largely abandoned cemeteries all through southern Oklahoma, you find headstones that read "murdered by human wolves."
Whoa.
Now, what would it take for a people in a very small town where there was normally 30, 40 people to carve into a loved one's headstone, "murdered by human wolves"?
Exactly.
And I believe you guys have a still of one of those headstones I supplied to you.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stills that I want to take a look at. Let's take a look as we continue our discussion here, Jack. How tall are the creatures? Kind of describe them for us.
They're often described as being 8 to 9 feet tall, sometimes smaller, but they're also described as being younger when they're described as being smaller. So we know that these things are, they're not just popping out of the ether into existence. They apparently have little ones, younger ones, and older ones, and these are a creature that are breeding and multiplying.
Do they ever walk on all fours?
They do. They've been seen going to all fours from an upright position and vice versa. In my research and investigation, I discovered that some of the very first sightings occurred in Wisconsin in the late 1800s at a place known as 𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗏 State Park. 𝗪𝗪𝗓𝗏, of course, is an allusion to the Inca home.
We've got a picture here of a Dogman track.
Right.
Really unusual, isn't it?
It is. It's usually a three-toed print. There's part of a dog's foot that when you look at how a dog stands, the pad is actually on the ground, and then there's this sort of 45-degree angle bone behind the foot. And a lot of these tracks look like these things have evolved to where that bone has now been pushed to the ground and is helping to support the weight of the creature. And it came to me one day that what we had to be looking at was either an etheric manifestation of this creature through some form of ancient worship, or these native people came across this creature in the wilds and began to deify it, that there were little to no other options. Now, JC held the belief that these dog-headed creatures were actually remnants of the Anunnaki, of the Nephilim, that they were a genetic experiment of some kind, and that they were...
Something went awry?
They were a military class.
Huh.
These particular creatures were the soldier class.
Did they communicate? Did anybody ever hear them speaking or anything like that?
One of the very first cases occurred at Astalon State Park in 1888, and the gentleman claims, the eyewitness claims, which he was the security guard of the park at that time, that this creature opened its mouth and spoke words to him. He didn't know what language it was, but it sounded almost Egyptian to him.
Huh. Do you think they were more earthbound creatures or extraterrestrial, in your opinion?
That's the million-dollar question right now. You know, with Sasquatch, through 2 different genome studies now, one made public, one which was conducted in private by Dr. Ketchum on, the private study was done on behalf of JC and a few other investigators when we had discovered DNA of a Sasquatch.
Is this the same, you just said that, it was the same study when she was looking for Bigfoot, right?
Right.
Okay.
She came to the conclusion on her Sasquatch study that the mitochondrial DNA, the DNA on the mother's lineage side, was in fact modern day human. And when she conducted the Dogman DNA study, it too came across mitochondrial DNA human, Native American.
Wow.
Right, and the Sasquatch study, what it showed was that 12 to 15,000 years ago, during what was called the Younger Dryas period, there was an upright walking hominid species. That species has never been cataloged in the World Gene Bank. That's the major problem with Sasquatch DNA. They have never discovered the fossilized remains of this upright walking hominid species. Therefore, they have never actually taken DNA from one of these fossilized samples and made it into the actual gene bank. So that when they do the study, it comes up as an unknown relic hominid species and human female.
Jack researcher Scott Carpenter had a video of what could be a dogman.
In this clip you're about to see, this was my first encounter with the dogman. Now, of course, I didn't see him or know he was watching me. I was, again, caught him on the back trail camera. But I was just looking around my feeding station, checking out my tape traps for Bigfoot hair, and just generally looking around the area. And I caught a few seconds of the dogman behind me here in a brush pile. And what he's doing, he's actually looked up and he's watching me. He's just got his head peeked up. Now in this sequence, he looks more like the traditional werewolf or dogman. But consistent with the footage I captured this day, he appears to only have one ear. And I don't know whether an ear was injured and it's just laying down on his head, or it's been bitten off, removed, who knows. But the creature only has one ear, and it's the right ear. So in this sequence, he is standing behind me, watching me, and there's actually a very interesting part of this segment where the dogman will actually, his ear will actually go, and so his ear will kind of be flopped over, and then for whatever reason, the ear goes up, and just like a dog, he kind of zooms in on me. So that's what's in this segment. I will loop that segment of the ear going up, so it'll be easier to see. Enjoy.
It's amazing he was able to even see this creature through all the greenery.
Well, the great thing about Scott Carpenter is that he realized early on, and Scott is a completely no-nonsense human being.
You can tell.
Yeah, I've been in contact with Scott for a long time, and he's the kind of guy that really doesn't mess around. What he says happened really happened. You know, he's
talking about a bent ear and
straight
everything
as the
else.
day is long. And he discovered that every time he was out on a hike, on a hunt, he could hear activity behind him. And he'd turn around and there wouldn't be anything there. So he got to where he would wear a camera pointing backwards at all times, filming behind him. And that's where this footage actually came from. He reviews that video every time when he gets home, the back camera footage, and he saw this thing poking out of the woods
Something
and
was
looking
there.
at him.
I don't know what it was, but something was there.
It is, when you look at the very close-up examination and slow down video of that creature, it is quite something. It is very, very scary.
Could it be a Bigfoot?
Now, you know, if it is, it's a new type of Sasquatch that we didn't know existed before, because they have elongated snouts, they look like dogs, they have upright standing ears most of the time, and these things can stand 9-10 feet tall.
Wow.
I've got a photograph of one of them, and it literally had its arm bent in a 90-degree angle in front of it like this, and it stood up the entire time it was being filmed. There are frames where it lifts its nose to the air and begins to sniff our scent on the air. You can even see the pupil of this creature.
Jack, geographically, where are these creatures located?
Well, right now they're being seen in most of the states. The major hotspot in North America is Michigan, along what they call the land of the lakes.
Yeah.
There's a peninsula there where there's not only a cluster of historical sightings.
In the Upper Peninsula?
Right, but a growing body of sightings taking place there even as we speak. Wisconsin, a lot of the other Great Lakes states that are all along that area.
So primarily the central states?
Right, well, and from there they seemingly work a trail down to the Deep South. And in the Deep South, you know, around New Orleans, you have what's called the loup-garou, which is the French word for werewolf.
What do you think they eat?
You know, I think they're omnivorous, just like the Sasquatch seems to be. These things are meat eaters, but they also seem to have the ability to forage off of berries and other types of food available to them in the forest.
Leaves, things like that.
Right.
What a great nutritional dinner that is.
Right. You know, and with Sasquatch, you can look at the gene study that was done, and you can kind of see why there's a natural scientific explanation for this creature. The Greater Dryas period was a period when the Earth had been struck by a comet, and when that happens, species that have very similar DNA makeups tend to interbreed out of an innate sense of survival.
Sure.
And this creature had a very similar genetic makeup to archaic humans, and it began to interbreed with archaic human females, and that produced the lineage that we call Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Have there been any reports of these creatures being winged?
You know, there's been close-up reports of eyewitnesses shooting them almost, you know, point-blank range, and these things barely even flinching. In the Dogmen, in the case of the Dogmen and
But
Sasquatch.
they clearly knew they hit it.
Yeah, they could actually, you know, they saw the thing sort of flinch and move, but it didn't appear to do the damage that they would think, you know, some of these weapons would do. You're talking about guys that are professional hunters that are carrying 30-06 or a AR-15 or a 45 caliber handgun. These aren't people out in the woods with a BB gun. And they're shooting them pretty close up, and seemingly it has no effect. And
could these creatures, Jack, be Mothman?
I don't believe so. You know, the descriptions of Mothman being a winged creature, that's not something that often occurs in Dogman sightings. Over the past year or two, there's been a huge number of so-called Mothman, Owlman, giant bat sightings going on around the greater Chicago area. That's something that's been chronicled, very detailed by Phantoms and Monsters and among a few other investigative bodies, and we as well have gotten nonstop eyewitnesses, including one lady who was able to give us a very, very detailed account of what she saw. She said the creature was only 100 feet from her. Very, very long, wing-like wings, in excess of 12 to 15 feet wingspan. She said this thing looked to her like a real biological creature, that it wasn't something that was appearing from another dimension, let's say.
It's got to scare the living daylights out of people when they are confronted by these things.
Absolutely. Many of the witnesses are just petrified by what they saw.
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah,
Right?
Right.
Have you ever seen one?
I have not seen one, but we do have a photograph sent to us by one of the eyewitnesses, and you can see pretty decent detail what these creatures are.
And nobody would be dumb enough, Jack, to put a costume on and go running around?
No, when you look at the photograph and some of the
That's where they get
descriptions of
shot.
what this thing is, you're left wondering what it could be. I mean, when these things take off, they hear flapping of wings, but it's not like they hear a jetpack going off,
Right.
or the sound of a drone flying or something like that. They can see the creature breathing, they see the eyes glowing. There's an instant paralyzing feeling of fear among them. Many of the eyewitness accounts have been multiple people. One of them, there was over 20 people who saw the creature in the same area around Chicago. So why they're appearing in that area, we don't really know. Are they a Mothman-like creature? Well, some would say that the descriptions are very, very similar to what people were seeing in Point Pleasant at the time. Other theories include that perhaps this is either a new species of what we would call a flying fox. There are giant bat species.
It's a big flying fox, right?
Right. There are very large bat species in Indonesia and elsewhere called the golden crown flying fox. And it's a very, very big bat. I mean, this thing's got a body that's at least 4.5 feet in length.
That would be horrible to look at.
Right. And
4-foot bat.
maybe you're seeing a migration of a type of species like that. Maybe we're seeing an evolution, that this is a new species. And maybe, just maybe, these things are being born from dormant prehistoric eggs. There are many scientific studies talking about the idea that some of the prehistoric species could lay eggs in the earth that would survive for hundreds and thousands of years.
And then they hatch?
Eventually to hatch. And maybe it's global warming, some other type of mechanism that's causing them to hatch, and maybe we're witnessing the rebirth of prehistoric species.
Now let's talk about Bigfoot and what the heck this creature might be. Because I hear everything, Jack. I hear extraterrestrial, dimensional, an animal. What do you think Bigfoot is?
I don't believe for a second that Bigfoot is either interdimensional or an alien.
You do
flying
not.
Flying UFOs around. Now it is true, and many of paranormal investigators like to sort of gloss over the fact that in 20% of all credible Bigfoot sightings, a UFO is also reported the same time. 20% is a large number.
That's a huge number.
It is. When I began to investigate the human abduction phenomenon of what appears to be humans being taken by an alien species for a genetic experiment or testing of some kind.
David Paulides.
Right. Well, I suspect the same thing is happening with Sasquatch. Now that we have a genome study that shows that they are part, in fact, modern human, and we have the same alien craft in close proximity to a creature that shares DNA with us, and the fact that we know that alien abduction of humans is going on, it's not too far of a stretch to assume that these creatures are also being abducted for their DNA.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.